So last week we talked about some of these commands that you can use, and I told you that we have different operating system, and the way each one of them handle this thing is different. Like on Windows now, we have CMD and we have PowerShell. While on other operating system like the Mac OS and Linux, there you have other command there too, other terminal that you can use like bash, which is something that we install this our git so that we can have access to bash on the window, which is what you are seeing here. This is bash here, but this thing is not there by default on Windows. So Windows comes with its own terminal that you can use to type all these commands. So the first one that is common on Windows is this CMD, which is a command line there. And once it is loaded, you're going to see this is one of the terminal that comes with Windows. But this one here now is quite old, and a lot of command you are going to be using when you are deploying your app doesn't work with this window command prompt, because the way it's come with, like that time when this window started, each computer or each of these operating system come with their own terminology, and a lot of things are different from each other, even though they are doing the same thing. But the way you type the command on Windows is quite different from the command you are going to use on all these other operating systems that are Unix, like the Linux and Mac OS there. So here now, if you want to check directory, what you use is this. But if you type that thing now on Linux or Mac, it will not work, because this thing only works on Windows. And when you are deploying your app later on, most of the operating system that are being used to deploy is Linux. Like it's kind of cheap, and you don't need to pay. Windows now, you need to buy license before you can use their operating system, except you download the crack one, or you still need to pay for license. But with the other one, you don't need to pay for anything. Just go online, download it, and you can do anything you want with the operating system. And since something like that is free, so a lot of people that are doing the hosting platform, they use Linux, because first of all, it is the size is small compared to the window. It doesn't come with unnecessary stuff that you don't need when you are deploying your application online. And again, too, it's still free, which is the number one stuff. It's free, and you can modify whatever the code, because the code is online. If you know that you can do this thing, just download the source code and you modify it according to your own text. But Windows, you cannot see their code, and at the same time you have to pay for the license. And again, the size is really big. When you want to install Windows 11 now, it's around that 5 gig or so. But this Linux now is just a couple of MB. You already downloaded the stuff, and you just put your file, which is the application that you want to run online, and everything will start working. So since we are not going to be using Windows, or a lot of almost all of them, they are using Linux, except any provider that is coming from Microsoft. That's where they use Windows to host anything. So if you want to use Microsoft services, then you know that you are going to be using Windows, because they will use their own this operating system to do all this thing. But when you are using any other service provider, which is what you are going to be doing there, they are using Linux behind the scene there, like that. And since all the command you are going to be typing later on is coming from Linux, so there's no need of us learning this one that we are not going to be using, because what you'll be doing here doesn't work on Linux, which is this bash here, like this. So how do we have the experience of Linux on Windows? So another way of running it is by using the PowerShell that comes with Windows. But that one too, it has some limited, or it will restrict you from doing some stuff that you are going to do on a normal Linux window. So where's that one too? Just search for it on your system. Once you just type PowerShell, you are going to see the application, which is another terminal on its own that you can use to run this ETS. So we have Windows PowerShell. So on Windows, you have two terminal. You have command prompt, which is really old. So that's the reason why they are not coming with this PowerShell, to kind of bring in some command from Linux that you can use it here too. But this one too is all of them that is supporting it. Not every of the command that you're going to use on Linux. Some of them say the way you type it here is quite different. For example, like the touch that I talked about. So app.js like this. So let me wait for it to run. And once it's done, you see that sometimes this thing will just bring out error. As you can see now, it said the time touch is unrecognized. The same thing too here. This one too doesn't know what is touch, but touch is something that you can use to create a file or Linux. As you can see here too, it said it's not found. So, and is this something you'll be using online to create a file? Or again, we have nano that you can use nano like this app dot js. If I switch it, is any it cannot find. Here too, if I use it app dot js like that, and you see it's bringing out all these stuff like that. So, and we don't want to do and all the command we want to be typing, they are saying not found. So instead of us using all this in, we need to have a terminal that is close to the Linux terminal. And one of them is this bash. Just like you have PowerShell, we have bash on Linux and some other a lot of terminal that you can install on them. But the one that follow it, that come with it by default is this bash here. So how do we have access to the bash? That's when we install the Git. Even Git later on, we're going to be using it because that's what you're going to use to share code that you are working on. Because when you are working with other people, how do you guys communicate? By sharing your code, you use the Git, because the Git is like history tracker of your code, which you can use to kind of save the progress of everything that you're working on. Okay, today I want to work on login. You are going to save it. Tomorrow you work on another feature. But what if it's something that you like, you did kind of discover a bug in what you've already worked on? You can actually go back and fix or even remove what you've kind of work on before, or even go back to maybe you deleted a code and maybe like a mistake, but you want to recover it back. You can actually use it to look at the history of the work you've worked on your code, and you're going to see everything that is going on there. And as you can see from it, this is even the message here. So look at the person that we're working together. Can you see what is asking? And please help me confirm SLAB to see what is the prod branch. Branch is a way of view, or is a way of kind of no, creating a name for different features that you are working on there. This thing that is talking about now is all about the Git that will be explaining later on like that. So a branch, maybe you want to work on login, you are going to create a branch for that. Whatever you are doing in that branch will not affect another branch. So you, the same code, the same copy of code, you just branch out of that one, you take out of it, but you now branch to a new particular name. So whatever you are not doing with that one, it will be isolated from where you get the original code from. So whatever stuff you do there, later on you can bring it here, or you can just continue doing anything you want to do with that without affecting what is going on from where you branch out from like that. What are you going to be using? Like, it is Git, which is the one that tracks everything that is going on in your code like that, and that's what you install. But it doesn't work like that. You have to kind of activate it in the project that you want to keep tracking there. But for now, we are not using it. We're using the bash that actually came with that the Git there, which is this command line that we can use to type any of these Linux command, and it's still going to work on Windows, rather than using these two dummy command prompt here. If you want to do anything related to Windows, you can use this too. But if you want to do anything that is universal, it's better you use this bash here, because you can run some of the code here and it's to still work on the window there like that. And last week we were able to discuss some of these navigation commands here that you can use to move from one place to another. Create a file, create a folder, delete a file, delete a folder, and so forth like that, where we have this ls to list out whatever the directory you are currently working on. But how do you get the directory you are working on? On bash, the way it displays its own stuff is quite different from the way it is on this command prompt. On the command prompt, you are going to see the address or the path of the current folder that you are working on. So here now, it said I'm currently inside this raster, which is inside users, and user is inside this C drive like that, which means the current user that logs in. So every user that logs in have their particular folder where all the files of that user will be saved into. So if you create two users, that one too is going to have its own folder with that name of the user there. But I only have one user, so it is here, and everything will be saved inside this place. But from here, I can actually move from here to another folder or branch out of this place. But you know, on this bash, your home directory, this is what we call the home directory, which is the folder of the user that logs in. But you know, here it doesn't display it like that. What you just see is this TDL here, which is this stuff here, this symbol, which is representing the same thing that you have here. So this TDL is just telling you that you are currently on the home directory, but you can actually switch to any other directory by using the CD that we talked about. But don't forget, when you want to change from one directory to another one, you know, you need to specify the path, and the path can either be relative or absolute. Now on window, a path is absolute when you start with this C drive. But if you only mention the part of it, we just say part name like this. This is what we call a relative part, because whatever you are typing here, it will be relative to the current folder that you are working on. But once you put C there like this, once you put this C there like this, it means you are specifying the absolute part, which means the entire part of the um folder that you want to access, or the file that you're already dealing with there. But you know, don't forget, on Linux we call it directory, we don't call it folder. But folder and directory, they are the same thing. So whether you call it folder or you call it directory, you are just saying the same. About in this other operating system, it is known as directory, but here we call it folder, or you can even call it directory like that. And that's the reason why if you do anything, what you get back is a no file or directory like that. So we're able to talk about some of the command there, like this ls, which lists out everything that is inside a particular folder you are working on. There we talk about this clear, which you can use to remove all these excess stuff that you are seeing on the screen, so that it can give you a brand new interface to type your command there. See, whatever I've typed before, it will wipe everything up, because when you are doing some stuff, you might have a lot of information that you don't need again. You just want to have a new, you don't need to close it and create another one. Just type clear. This clear that I just typed now, if you go to display now and type it, can you see what it's saying? Not recognized. Because this one come with its own way of clearing. I think it's this CSC like this. So this one is kind of crazy like that, to just remove the text from the screen. So I won't be using these two. This sometimes some of the command from Linux will work here, but not all of them that is working like that. That's why I will be using this one, so that yeah, kind of close to the operating system that is being used online to deploy application there, or to deploy your sites. In case there is need for that, you already we are familiar with it, because you need to move from one folder to another folder in order for you to see the file you want to work with. And when you all this deployment server online, there is nothing like interface where you click button to move from one. No, what you do is you talk to this thing through the CLI, and these are some of the common command that you need for starter there. So we have this ls, we have cd to change to a directory, we have clear to wipe off whatever you have, or you have this mk which is make directory. And I told you last time, you can actually create multiple directory or multiple file at the same time. Just specify in all the directory you want to create there, and it's going to create the stuff for you inside the current stuff that you're working on. For example, now if I want to go to where all this is saved to, so if you look at this in this Mayovest 23 now is coming from a particular folder, so I can actually move there by specifying the path where this thing is coming from. So how do I see this path? So if you click one or any one of the file folder and you refill in File Explorer, you are going to see the full path of everything. It's always giving you the full path at the top here. So starting from the local disk, there is training, there is student, and there is now this Mayovest. If you click this empty area, it actually show you like that, which is C, training, the student, and this one like this. But don't forget, on window, this doesn't care whether you type them the way it is here, or you like what I mean by that, the case. So Windows doesn't care about the case, whether you type it in small letter or you type it in capital letter. As long as that thing is here, it will find it for you. But in a normal Linux system, you have to follow the case. So if it stop is having capital D, you must type it like that. If it is small, you have to type it in small. But yeah, we don't care about that. So I can quickly move into that folder, which is going to be training. From there, we have students, and there we now have Mayovest training 3. And if the folder is okay, as you can see, it will take me to that particular place. Now look at it, it's not showing this there again because I'm not in my home folder. I'm now inside this particular folder, and whatever I'm doing here, it will happen to this folder here. So if I create a file, it will appear here because the folder we have in VS Code is still the same folder I have here. And if I use touch now, app.js, then it's going to create the app like that, which is what I have down here, like that. Or if I do, I think that one is there before. So touch app2.js, and you see that it's going to create, because we are working with the same folder. So whatever I'm doing here, I can see it here. And whatever I'm doing here too, I will see it here like that. So we have a way of creating a file, we have the way of creating folder, and again we can remove a folder. But no, this only works when you are dealing with empty directory. So that means whatever folder you want to remove must not have any file or any other thing inside it. So you can have folder inside it, you can have file inside it. If you have anything inside it, it will not allow you to remove that particular folder. But how do you remove a folder that have content inside it? So we have this one here. So this one, remove a folder that have content, where you need to use this rm. So this recursive, this r mean recursive, enter the folder and delete what is inside it first before you actually delete that folder that you mentioned here. So when you say directory name 1, so when you want to delete this folder now, if something is inside it, it will enter that folder first and delete what is inside it before deleting that folder itself. And again, we have removing a file. So you can remove any file, like just like this app2 that I created right now. I can remove it by just using rm, then mention the name of the file that you want to remove, and the file is there, is going to remove it like that. If you want to remove a directory, we have rm dar, but this only works on directory that is empty. So for example, if I use test4, as you can see, test4 is no more there again. But if I use rm dar test, and since test is having something inside it, you see it said remove fail to remove test, directory is not empty. So with remove that, you cannot remove any empty directory like that. These are the basic command that you need when you need to move around your system there, like that. So after you know how to move from one place to another one, we need to know how to use the node, because node is a runtime environment that allows you to, use your JavaScript code outside of the browser. So the node too come with its own command, and one of the command there is just this node here. But before this one works, you need to install node, which is what we did last week. How do you install the node? Just go to the browser, just type node.js. So this thing is going to show you the download here, and if you go to the download section, it will bring a different version for you. Or I told you last time that you should always install the LTS version, which is a long time support. So which means that one is okay, and because not that you'll be going with the new version. Of they have new version and they have the long time. This LTS is long time support, but if you look at it, the current version is actually 22.2.0. But the long time support, which means this one is bulletproof and a lot of things, is this one like that. Like most of the program you are going to use with this node, it will work because it's LTS. A lot of them are based on this one, but that doesn't mean you cannot use this current one, but it might actually not work for some library or the framework you want to work with. And again, depending on your this thing, depending on your operating system, it will show it for you here, or you can even change it and install for any operating system. As you can see, there is Mac, there is Linux that I'm talking about there, because when you want to build this your application later on, you need to download Node.js on it. But all these server online, all these provider, they've already set up all this thing. But most of them, I think they are on this 18 or something like that. And that's why you need to know the version of the node you are using for your application, and you need to know where you want to deploy, whether they support that version or not. Because if you go and deploy something on deploy application that is using 20 on this thing that is using 16, you might have a problem, and the thing might, you just see the error that it's not running like that. That's why it's always good that you use the LTS, because you don't want to be using the current one and where you want to deploy it does not have this thing yet, because they don't quickly update their node like that. They always stay on the one that is bulletproof. That means the one people are using, that they know that there is no problem with it, not that they will just quickly bring. And once you're done downloading your this thing here, the next thing is to install it. And once you install it and everything is okay, if you type the node and you use this -v here, which is what we use to check the version of the node that you have on your system. So if I press enter and you can see it, you'll see that it will bring out the version. And once you show the version now, it means the node installed on this system successfully like that. But if you are not seeing any stuff, because anytime you type anything on the command line and it's not showing you what it's supposed to show, as you can see, what you see that command not found. When you see command not found, it means this particular command you are typing, no, this thing doesn't know about it. And that's one thing about this command line interface. You have to, like, all these commands, must not forget them, because if you forget them, nothing will work. But luckily, some of these commands that is related to Node, you always see them online depending on the framework you are working with. So because each one of them will give you the instruction that you need to follow in order for you to build application with their framework, and they will tell you how to install. But first, you know, they always mention it that you need to have Node.js installed like that. But after you already have the Node.js installed, you can now dive into any framework that you want to use. But there's some stuff that some of these frameworks are using that we don't know yet. There's some features of JavaScript, which is known as this ES6 feature. We call it this ES6 features here. So there's some features that come with this version of JavaScript that we've not really talked about there. One of them is this import and export. Import means that you have look at it here. We have two JavaScript here. So one functionality from here, I can use it in another JavaScript file. I don't need to jam pack all my code inside a single file. I can separate all this in a separate file. But any one of them that I need that functionality can go to that file and pick whatever it needs to pick. But you can't just go there. That thing was I've already exported that stuff. So if anything that this file is not exporting out, you can't just go there and say you want to import it. So one of the features you need to know before you enter framework is that you must know about import and export. And the way the import and export works is depending on whether you are using it directly with normal JavaScript or you are using with Node.js. Node.js supports, it have two type of the functionality that I'm trying to talk about right now. So Node.js come with this, what we refer to as a common JS, and it supports ES6 modules. So modules is a way of you breaking your code into smaller JavaScript file that can work together. So each JavaScript file is what we now call module. So this app.js now is one module, which is containing its own isolated code. Again, I can have another JavaScript file here. It's going to contain its own code. Then another JavaScript file can now pick something from both of them. But when you want to do this, we have this common JS, which is how the Node.js is solving this problem, and we have this ES6 module. For now, I will only talk about the ES6 modules way of importing or exporting out functionality like that. But before this thing works, because you don't want to do it, if you want to do it from the browser, it's actually cheap. We have the way of doing it on the browser. So for you to do it on the browser, for it to work, so under this JS here, you know, we have this JavaScript file, and we have this index.html where we are connecting our JavaScript down here. If you look at it, we use scripts and we pass this index.js. What you are doing here is the old ways of connecting JavaScript to HTML. So this one means you are not using the module features. This one now, you cannot, inside this JS now, cannot import any functionality from another JavaScript file. It will not work because it's not using the features of ES6 module, and the browser doesn't do it for you by default. You have to instruct the browser that the script you are loading here is modules. That means it can import functionality from other files. So how do you give it like that? Is by using this type. So you need to specify the type of the script that you are using. And if you look under the type, we have text like JavaScript, and another thing we have there is modules. So how do you generate the module? So let me put it on this one so that we can have the two of them. So we have this script. Let me generate the one that is meant for module. As you can see, that is normal script and that is script for modules. And if I click on it, can you see it's setting the type to module? So which means whatever JavaScript we are loading here is a module JavaScript, which means it can load other JavaScript functionality like other files that you created there. For example, here now, let me create a file, another JavaScript file. So we already have this index. Then I have this app.js. So this app.js, what I want to do is I want to add some functionality here. Those functionality now, this index.js can come there and pick them. Not that I have to do the same thing again inside this index.js. And that's what we call modules. Modules allows you to split your JavaScript code into different files that you can now reuse in any other file that requires that functionality. So here now, inside this app this one here, I have a function, and what is this function going to do? Display name like this. So what name do you want to display? I want to pass the name. We've talked about this one before, which is for creating a function. And what do you want to do? I want to do documents. So I want to use it on browser. That's why I'm using document. You cannot use document outside of the browser. So document dot write. What are you writing? I'm writing. So I'm coming. Welcome to the app of modules. Like that. So I'm going to have this name. But now I have this functionality inside the app.js. But the only thing that is connected to my index is this file here, which is going to be this index.js. The only thing that is connected to this place is this index.js. I'm not loading app.js. But what I want to do inside this index.js, I want to use the functionality that is coming from app.js. If you're not using module method, what you have to do is that you have to include all the script for each one of the JavaScript file. But when using the module feature, you don't need to do that. It's only one. But this single one can pick any functionality from other JavaScript that you have in your project. So if you look at it, we have this app and we have this index. But the only thing I'm loading on the browser is just this index.js like that. But I want inside this index.js, I want to pick the functionality that is coming from app.js. Before you can do that, the first thing you must do there is to make sure that the script that you are loading is having this type of module. So you are telling the browser that this file, it can actually import functionality from other JavaScript file. Because if you don't do it like that, it will not know that something is going on with this app here, or it will not know that this index is picking something from this app. Before it works, the script, this is how you do it by default when you are dealing with normal JavaScript code that doesn't import anything from other file. You just do your script index and go like that. But when you want to make it to be the one that can import from other JavaScript file, it must have this type module. So when it have type module, you are telling the browser that okay, this index can actually import functionality from other JavaScript file. But here now, you can't just go to any file and say you want to pick something from them when they are not giving out. Before you can pick something from any file, that file must already have been giving this thing out, because each one of them, they put all their code, or whatever file or whatever code you put inside a particular file, it is only for that file alone to use, not for any other file outside of it. But we said we want to pick this functionality from here and use it inside this index.js. So how do we do it? First thing we need to have there is that this app needs to export the functionality you want. Then index.js needs now to import that functionality. When you are using modules and you want to pick something from other file, there are two things that is going to happen. The first thing is that you need to export. And anywhere you want to use that functionality, you need to import. So before you can take anything from any file, that file must have already exported the functionality. Then when you want to use it, then you now import the stuff. But how do you export and how do you import? So when you want to export anything in JavaScript, when you want to export any functionality from a file, we have different types of exports. So when you're dealing with exports, we have what we refer to as default. We have default exports, and apart from default exports, we have the named exports. So these are the two types of exports that you need to know. What is default? Default means that anytime you are trying to import something from a file and you did not really specify what you are looking for, this is what is going to give you. But when you are talking about named, name means that you must use the same name as what that file is using to export the functionality. Default means that this one, when you don't specify what you are looking for and you are saying you want to import something for that file, whatever you are exporting as default, that's what is going to give you. But when you're talking about the named one, this one will only give you the same name that you're using to import that is coming from that particular um file. So let me put this in side by side so that you see what I'm, because this thing is very important though, before you, because these are the stuff you'll be using when you get to that side. And if you don't understand yet, what are you, what am I, you are doing export, you are doing import, what are we exporting, are we doing this here? So that's why you need to understand what is going on here, like that. So what do we want to do? What we want to do right now is that the first thing I want to do here is to create a button. Anytime you click on a button, I want you to use this functionality from this app.js. But where are we creating the stuff? So it's going to happen inside this index.js. So on this page, I want to have a particular button here. And once I click, you already know how to attach events on the element. So first, we need to have a button which is going to be up here. I'm going to create it somewhere here. So what I'm going to do is just that let me just use button, and I need to give it a class of trigger so that I can select it easily from my trigger like this. So we're going to, the text there is going to be trigger. So copy the class, save, and once I save it, this thing is going to appear on the screen, but it's not going to do anything. Why did I style my button to look like this? Okay, so the button is not looking like the way I want it to be because the style that we are doing here. So let me quickly apply a style on this one, because it's styling is based on the button that I have done here. Like it's trying to turn it to circle, but that's not what I want. As you can see, these are the styling on the button. But I don't want this thing to have this styling for that particular button. So button dot trigger like this. What did I want? Background should be red. The height should be auto. The weight should be auto like this. So just do this normal. Border radius too is here. So border radius, I don't need border radius, because that's the one it's making it to look like a curve stuff there like that. So this one should just be around that 1 rem, so that it's going to look. And again, it's not having padding. Padding should just be top and bottom 1 rem, 3 rem for left and the right like this. So as you can see, I have this button here. But what do I want to do? Once I click on this button, I want it to do something for me. What I want it to do, I want it to do what is inside this here, this function here. I want it to call it. But now, you know, this app.js is not really connected to the page at all, because we are not loading it. Let me close this CSS. We are not loading this particular JavaScript inside this page. What we are loading is index.js, but we want to use something that is coming from app.js, because we don't want to put anything inside this index.js directly. We want to use this index, but this index now is going to call a functionality that is inside this app.js. I told you before that one will happen, the first thing you need to do is that when you are loading your script, it must have this type module. So once you have this type module, it means this index.js can call other JavaScript files without you specifying it on the HTML page. So we've already had that button. So how do you select the button? We've talked about all this one. So my trigger button. So how do you select it on the page? No, we've talked about this document query selector because that's what I want to use to pick my element on the page, and I'm selecting the element based on class. So once you are done selecting this element, the next thing you need to do is to add event listener, which means you want something to happen anytime a particular event occur on this element. What event are we trying to add? We are adding click event. But when this event occur, what do you want to do is whatever function that you pass. So the first thing you have is add event listener. What type of event? So it means anytime I click on this button, I want to run this code. But don't forget, this your code too will receive the event that occur, which is something I can console log at just to kind of bring like it's going to be like a recap. So if I do this thing, save, this thing will not work until you trigger the event. Before you see this thing, the only time you are going to see this thing is when you perform this event. And what we are saying here is that, okay, we are targeting a button on the screen. How are you targeting it? I'm using the query selector. And what are you using there? I'm using the class, but I gave this particular element a class. And once you find the element, add this event on it. So what type of event are you adding? Click. Because you know we have different type of event. We have double click, you have click, you have when you press something on keyboard, and a lot of but you know not all the elements support all these events. You have to use them at the appropriate place. You know, you can't just do submit now on button submit will only work when you are dealing with form, because that's when the event is going to trigger. Again too, when you're talking about key press or input, it only work on something that can get content from the keyboard. You know, this one now, you can't get there's no way you'll be typing something here, it will not be appearing on the this thing. But in order for it to work, you must be using input, which is the one that allows you to type. So from there now, it fired events of the keyboard. But right now, any element can fire this click, because you can click on any element. Since you can click on any element, I'm using them because it's the cheapest one that you always use like that, the click event, because any element you can click on them. Even the text, you can listen for when the user click on that text and you perform anything you want. But I'm not doing it on the text, I'm doing it on the button. And once this thing is clicked, look at, nothing is happening because the console here will not happen until this event occur on this element alone, because that's the element I'm attaching the event on. If I click on this one, nothing will happen. If I click on this one, nothing will happen, because we did not attach this event to any of these elements. The only one that we attach the event on is this one. And if I click on it now, can you see? That's when it will fire what is here, which is giving us the type of event that occur and a lot of information about the event. And we already use some of the stuff under this one, like the target. We talk about current target, and we talk about the type that occur, and a lot of other information here that you don't really need, except if you are dealing with no, when you go to some sites, if you click on a particular site, you are going to see a color coming out at that particular location there. So what they are actually doing there is they are using all these offsets x and y and page y and x, but this one is one that tells you where you actually click on the screen. So it tell you the location of where you click on that. Look at it now. Currently the offsets x and y is 5 4 and 2 1, but it's related to the element. So if I click close to this side, you see that it will fire another one, and if you look at the value, you see that where are you? Can you see now that it's not different? Because here now around here is 0, but we've moved to this side, it's this thing now. You know, it's increasing the value, you know, depending on the width of the box. So if I click close to this side, you see that the value is going to be lesser compared to what we have right now, because this, it started from here from 0 and it keep moving until you get to the last one. So if I click on this one now, if you look at, can you see now that it's quite you know, different from what we have before, like that. So that's how this thing works. So based on this and this page X now, you can combine it together to know where the user click on the page. So based on these two values, because this thing, they are just like a pointer to where this your cursor is on that page, and based on that now, you can now place something on, maybe anytime they click, you want to place an element at that particular location that the user click. So how do you know where the user click? This is where all this information comes to. It will give you the information about where the user actually click on the page, and you cannot do anything you want to do on that line there. But we're not doing something like that. What we want to do is that once you click on this thing, we want to use this functionality that is inside this app.js. But you know that this app.js is not connected to this index.html. So which means this index now .js want to pick something from here which is not inside the HTML. So how do you do it? You can now use the module feature, which allows you to split your JavaScript code into different files, and you can, go to any of these files, pick whatever you need, and from there you use it inside that particular JS file. But don't forget, before this thing will work, you need to import, you need to export before you can import any functionality from a file. Where do you want to import something from this app? But right now you cannot import this thing because this file is not exporting this functionality. So before you can use this thing inside another file, it means this app.js is already exporting this functionality. But how do you export? We have default and we have named. Default means that when you are trying to import something from here and you do not mention the exact name of what you are looking for, this is what is going to give you by default. But if you need to mention the name of that functionality you are looking for, you can use this named export, which name means that the same name that I'm using to export it, that's the same name you must use to import it. That's what we call named export. But if it is default, you don't even need to use the name that I use to export it. As long as it is the default, then you can use any name to import that functionality. So how do you export default? To export default, you use this. We have this default. Let me bring it out for you so that you see how, because this thing is in VS Code like that. So we have the export default. Whatever that is now in front of this thing is what you are exporting as a default. So what I want to export that display name. So here now what we are saying is that this file, it has this display name, but every other JavaScript file can import this display name and use it in their own file as if they are the one that created that functionality. This functionality here now, we only have it inside this app.js. I don't have it inside this index.js, but I want to use it here. So in order for it to work, the file needs to export the functionality first. But when you're exporting, you can actually do it in this default way, or you can use named export. You can have multiple name export. You can only have one default because that you are confusing the system like that. You say you are exporting default, you are now exporting two default. How is it going to know which one to pick when you are you don't know what you are looking for? So you need to give you only one, not that two or three. But when it is named, you can export any one of them with different names, so it will work. But with default, you can only export one thing as a default. You can't export multiple functionality as a default export. So how do you export as default? Started with this export keyword, followed by the default, then followed by that functionality. If you already defined the functionality before, just mention the name, which is going to that's the name of what I have there. For example, here now I can have const x to be 5. What if I want to get this x in another file? I can actually export it too. But now you can only have one default. So it means if it's the x you want to export, just mention x. So anytime you are trying to import something from this file and you don't mention what you are looking for, this is what this x now is what is going to give you. But what if I want to use the named one? So when you are dealing with named, you have to do it with the functionality you are trying to export. So if I want to export this one now, it means beside this stuff, I must have already used the exported. So let me move it down to this side, because when you are doing the name export, the only thing you just have beside it is just export like this without default. When you are doing default, what you need is the name of the functionality that you are trying to export at. But that thing must have already been defined somewhere. You can see that I already defined the x here. But when you are doing the named, you see that this one now is not containing default. So what this means that anytime you want to import this in, this is the same name you must use to import it. With this x now, I can call it y, I can call it z, I can call it double, because default means That's what it's going to give you when you are looking for something that it doesn't know about. So when you say you want to import something but you don't really know about it, this is what it's going to give you. But if you are talking about the named one, you must use the same name of that functionality that you are exporting now. And you can export multiple named exports. It doesn't need to be one. So here I can export const y to be just, or name to be just testing export like this. So what you are saying here is that you are exporting this particular variable. You can still use it here, but you are exporting it out for any other JavaScript file that need this particular name. But if this thing is not there, you cannot use it. Can you see that it is gray out? It's telling you that this thing now is not being used by anybody and you can't use it outside of this file. But if I use it like this one now means that this thing can actually go outside and you can use it in other files. So when you want to export a functionality, you either use the default one or use the named one. And the named one means that the same name you are using here to define that functionality, that's the same way you are going to use to import it anywhere you need it. So now how do we import? We've already talked about how to export. So which means this file now is giving you access to all this functionality here. But here now you cannot do anything with this one. I use const age to be 1. This one now you cannot use it outside of this file because it's not being exported out like that. So since you are not exporting this thing, you can't use it. You can't just come inside this index and say you want to import age. It will not work. But you can import name, you can import display name, or let me even use this one as a username like this. So age, you cannot use it outside of this file. Only this file can use it. This display and username, you can use it inside this file and you can use it outside of this file. Anything you are exporting out, you can use it inside that same file and outside of that file. So how do we now import? So the same thing here too, just like the way you can export default and you can export name, here too you can import default and you can import named. So when you want to import, so we have the import default. So when you want to import default, this is how you are going to do it. You are going to have import keyword, then followed by whatever name you want to use. So name here. So let me just call it any name. Then from the file. So this is how to import something from a particular, when you're using the default. So this any name means that you can rename, like the default stuff that is coming from that file, you can use any name to represent it, but that's the default. So it doesn't care whether you use X, you use Y, you use Z, it will always pick the default X word from here and put it inside this any name, and you can now use it. So this is one way of importing using this default. But when you're importing the other one, which is the named one like that, so import named export functionality like this, because so this one, you see the same import, but here now we have curly brace, and inside this place you are going to use named export like this. So this name export is whatever the name that the file is using to export this functionality then from file like this. Please look at it too. So when you're importing anything and it is default one, just call it, just give it any name. But if it is the name export, you have to use the same name that was used where this thing was being exported out like that. So if the name is X, when you want to import it, the curly brace, inside this curly brace, you have to use X. If the name is Y, you have to use Y. If the name is username, you have to use that same username. When you are exporting out, you can either do the default one or named one. Named means that if you want to use this thing now inside index, this is the same name you must use. This one too, this is the same name you must use when you are importing it. But when you are talking about the default one, you can use any name to import this X because it's the default like that. And how do you do the default one? This by using it like this. So for example, let me import that X. So here now I can use import default like this, from where are you importing from? I'm importing from app.js. That's what I call file. So whatever this file is in, whatever file you want to import from, like that. And if you look at it, let me input the path so that I know that it's actually from here. So from there now, I have access to that default export. So whatever that is going to be put in here is whatever you're exporting out as the default export from this app.js. So if I console log out this default, what we're supposed to have there is, what's the value there, sir? What are we using? So it's this 5. So this x from this file, we're exporting it out to any file that need it. So when you now when you now import the stuff, it will give you the value of x. So look at it here, we are importing default. No, I did not mention the name. I did not call it the same thing as what is that, which is x. So when you are importing default, you can use any name to represent the default export. But if it is named one, you must use the same name as the way it was being exported from that file. You can't change it to any, you can actually change it to, but for now, you have to use the same name. So here now, if I console log out this stuff here, like that, these people have been messaging me. Can you see what is now coming out now? Look at what is going on. It's printing out what? 5. But he said this thing is coming from what? Index online. But you know that we did not define anything like 5 here. Do you define anything like 5 here? No. We are picking the stuff from this file. And the browser is not even know, we do not even import this file on the browser there. Because the only thing that we just imported from this browser is just index. But this index is using something that is coming from app.js. And this is what we call modules. A module is a way of you breaking your JavaScript code into different files that can be shared in between them. So you don't need to jam pack everything into just one file. You create different files based on the functionality you want to work on. So when you want to work on a functionality there, and instead of jam packing everything together inside this single file, you just break them down according to the functionality. So I want to have a file that deals with how to add content on the page. I want to add a file that attach events on the content. I want to create a file that deal with managing the style of the content on the page. But all of them, I will now import them into a single file so that I can use them there. But this functionality, they are inside their own separate file. So anytime you need to manage anything, you just go to that file, do whatever you need to do, and you go to where you are using it. Not that you have to be scrolling up and down to look for what you are doing. Because in the framework, that's what they do. You have to split a lot of your code into smaller chunks of code like that, so that you'll be able to focus on one particular feature that you're working on. Not that you just focus on all of them in one file. No, it will split a lot of things into different files. But how do you pick those functionality, or how do you kind of combine it together? You need to use these modules features, which allows you to break your code into smaller file, and you can now import any of these functionality anywhere you need to use it like that. So we have this again. Now when you are doing your normal export, which is the default one, you can give it any name. How does it know that it's the 5 that is supposed to display? It's because we are sending this x as the default export. So for example, here now I can consider class should just be JSS class like this. JSS now. JavaScript class like that. So instead of me exporting x now, I want to export out class as the default. So now if I save the code, you see that we are getting something else, because now what we are exporting as default has changed, but the same thing is still what you'll be using. When you are importing like this, you are just importing the default stuff by being exported from the file. But what if you don't want to do it like this? You want to import a specific functionality. That's where the named export now comes in. So when you want to import now, this one you must import it like this same name here. You cannot use another name to do that. When you want to import this one too, you must use this particular name that this file is using to export the functionality there. So how do you do it? So here now, to import, let me move this one up so that it will be under this one. Then we are now having this. So to import any other one like this, you are going to have this curly brace, because Anytime it is named export, they come in a form of object. Anytime it is named export, they comes in a name like a object there. So from which file, which is going to be this app.js. So inside this place now, you mention that specific functionality that you are looking for inside this app here. So if I press Ctrl space bar, can you see we have display name and we have username, because that's the name I'm using to export them out. This is what we call named export. The same name you're using to export them out, that same name you are going to use to import them. So here now, if I use username, so this one now, this username now, you can now start using it. And from there, if I console log out the username, don't forget the username is not defined yet. It's defined inside this app.js. But now I'm using it inside this file because of this modules feature. And don't forget, this thing will not work until you use your type module here. If I remove this type module, you see that this thing will complain that I'm trying to use a module feature. Can you see now? Cannot use import statement outside of a module. So when you're dealing with module, when you're loading your script, you must specify that you are using the module features, which is a way of you splitting your JavaScript code into chunks of file that you can now import the functionality from those files. So I will have file that deal with calculation of everything that I want to, like when you're dealing with calculator, I know there's a lot of code that you need to, like addition, subtraction. So instead of me jam packing everything into this single file, I can just take all those functionality into another file. So any one of them that I need, I will just import it from it. So and anytime I need to modify anything, I know the file to go to modify whatever I need to do there, like that. But when you are doing this thing, later on, you will not be the one that will be doing this one. The framework will do it, but you need to understand what is going on behind the scene there. So here you must have this type module. When we install a framework tomorrow there, you see that that thing is going to have this type module that is loading the script like that. But if you don't do this thing, it will not work. And as you can see now, we are now having this testing export. Testing export is not inside this file. It is inside the app, which is here. But now we are importing this functionality inside this particular file, and we're able to use it. And even here today, you can modify anything you want to modify. But don't forget, here we define it as constant. It's not something you can modify like that. But assuming it is left now, you can change anything you want with it. So this is how we stop for this one. And tomorrow there, we continue from there.